Hey everyone, it is Simona with Hermta Solutions. Thank you for tuning in today for another Cyber Silk Plus webinar. Before we get started, I have a short announcement. Most of you know us, Hermta Solutions, as a value-added distributor of cybersecurity solutions. But this must change. I'm thrilled to announce that our portfolio of represented solutions has expanded beyond cybersecurity. And from now on, we help organizations not only to make their digital environment secure, but also provide technologies that create innovative and secure IT infrastructure. Actually, this is the reason today we have scale computing experts who will tell us more about hyperconvergence and how it helps to remove the pain of traditional infrastructure and increase data protection. Before we get started, I have a few reminders to say. The webinar will be recorded, so if you have a step away for any reasons, don't you worry, we'll send you the recording in about a day. Also, everyone is muted, so if you get a question, please write that question in the chat box, and we will answer it in the end of the webinar. We also encourage you to submit your questions anytime during the presentation. Now that housekeeping is done, I want to introduce you to our presenters, as I mentioned from Scale Computing, Thorsten Schieder, Regional Sales Manager, and William David Van Collenberg, Solutions Engineer. So, William, whenever you're ready, take it away.
Thank you very much. So we have the following agenda for today. We will have a short presentation about let's say the theory about scale, who we are, what we're doing, the positioning in the market, and a short explanation how we are doing HCI and why that is a quite good fit for all of you, maybe. And after that will be just a few slides. We will switch to a live demo. William will show us how scale works in real life. So my name is Thorsten. I'm the regional sales manager for the DACH and Eastern Europe region at Scale Computing. I'm at Scale since a year now, and I'm really happy to have this webinar together with you all. And yeah, let's see what happens and let's hear about Scale Computing. Whenever there are questions, there's a chat window. Please type your question, so we will answer the questions after the presentation or after the demo. So Scale Computing basically is a US company. We are based in Indianapolis. Our EMEA headquarters is based in the Netherlands with a couple of sales offices around, and we are providing a hyperconverged solution for small and mid-market customers, but as well for so-called distributed enterprise and edge computing customers. And what we are doing basically is we want to do IT infrastructure, very simple, very easy, that you as a user can, or as a customer, can concentrate on your real business and don't spend too much time and for sure too much money into these IT infrastructure stuff. So we're not alone in that. So we relying on a couple of technology partners, for example, Lenovo. So Scale Appliances are based on Lenovo hardware. We're working together for public cloud stuff together with Google. From a software point of view, there's additional backup and disaster recovery and security things together with Acronis, but there's also Parallels and Leostream in terms of VDI. Important to know is there's just one support. The support is quite good, so we have a very high net promoter score. That's 91. That's, from my point of view, the highest in the industry or in the HCI industry. And one reason is we are supporting also our alliance partners, which means whenever there's, for example, a disk failure, you need to call only Scale, and we take care about Lenovo, or we take care about Acronis, or we take care of Leostream, whatever. For sure, we do have a couple of customers around. So these the European customer slide. So for example, we're working together with Northern Marine. There we are running on their ships or their boats, one in the front, one in the back. There are two scale clusters. They are replicating, and Northern Marine is about that, saving a lot of money because they don't need to fly out with an helicopter whenever their old infrastructure has any failure. And for sure, there's more availability and security with a scale system. Also, for example, you see Ahold Delhaize. Ahold Delhaize is a retailer in Belgium. They're saving a lot of money with scale because they save many working hours. So they're just saving with the use of scale 2 working hours per week and spending into their infrastructure, which means that that's quite less, just 2 hours, but 800 times 2, it's 1,600 working hours saving per week. That's quite huge from my point of view. And there are a couple of others, like a typical mid-market customers, for example, Zillertaler Gletscherbahn, or we're running in Valken hospitals, or whatever things. I don't need to talk about each and every customer in detail. From a positioning point of view, as I said, we are focusing our solution for small, medium business, mid-market, edge and distributed enterprise, and we can provide the lowest TCO in the market for our HCI product. Because we do have real edge scenarios or systems available. I will talk about that just in a few slides. And if you are a partner, there's less competition because you can only offer scale with us. There's no way that any other hardware vendor like Dell, like HPE or whatever is able to create these kind of offerings and these kind of solutions. From a positioning here, we can easily compete against a traditional virtualization environment like 2 or 3 servers as shared storage, and for sure against all the other HCI vendors. And what we are doing is we are doing real hyperconverged. That means we're combining server, storage, and hypervisor into single architecture and combining all the layers here to have a completely fitted product. Because we are doing that, it's why we want to be like as I said, an iPhone or smartphone of IT infrastructure. And you can compare IT infrastructure management to a Formula One team. So you need many people, you need pretty much money to drive your IT infrastructure. For example, you have the tire management team, the pit stop team, the engine team, whatever. Same with IT infrastructure. There are security department, the storage department, the networking department. Everybody needs to cooperate and communicate intensively together. That's very, very expensive. And what will happen when these kind of mid-market or small, medium enterprises will use this traditional IT infrastructure? If you compare it, as I said, to Formula One, they will crash sooner or later, because the only thing what we want is driving a car, and that's the best with a normal car as we are used to it. So that's the way how Scale wants to provide IT infrastructure. And that's very, very simple. We have a unified management. Configuration or installation is done in a couple of minutes at least, so maybe 30, 40 minutes. You're pretty sure you need more time for rack and stack the systems in a rack. And they're all features you needed. There's self-healing, high availability, backup and replication, disaster recovery, everything included. There's no software licenses. There's just the appliance. Everything is integrated. There's a complete stack. There are no license model. Same with the support. We do have support 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days in a year, and just one model. And also in the licensing, there's no premium or standard or advanced or gold or whatever. And we have a scalability. Otherwise, I don't think we would call us by ourselves scale. So we can seamless scale out. We do have this mix and match feature, let's say, which from my point of view, no one other has in that way. So that means you can start with a scale cluster and you can add later on an appliance which has completely different CPU, for example, different amount of memory, different amount of storage. And that will work in a same cluster, but can't work with other HCI solutions. And also with other solutions, they are based most of the time of so-called virtual storage appliance model, which means there's a virtual machine running on top of the hypervisor and is doing the HCI magic, let's say. That works, but that costs pretty much resources. For example, Nutanix is doing the best, and they only using 24 gig of RAM. If you're using HPE Simplicity, you need a minimum 100 gig of RAM per node and a couple of cores. So you need pretty much hardware just to get the HCI up and running. If you compare that to scale, we just need 4 gig of RAM per node. That's more or less nothing. And we're not based on this virtual machine. We are directly integrated into the hypervisor. It's more or less like a driver. That means our performance is much better. The latency is much lower. In other words, it's like that. So in other solutions, you're able to run just a few VMs on the same hardware set. You are able to run much more VMs, or the density of your important systems is much higher. So that means you don't need to spend so much money in the hardware itself, or say using the same hardware for much more performance, much more VM density. And in addition, we are able to create really small system, which is really interesting for small customers. So from my point of view, we can easily create a HCI solution for these kind of customers. And with our product portfolio, we do have with the HE150, I'll talk later about that, the possibility about creating the smallest HCI cluster in the world. These are deployment options, which shows everything what's possible. So basically, you're starting with a centralized HC3 cluster. You can replicate to a single node. You can replicate from a separate single node from another cluster to another cluster for DR, or to the single node to backup, or to the cloud, public by Google right now, more to come. Or if you are a partner, you can easily create your own scale cloud, and everything is totally easily managed by just by a HTML5 browser. That's this so far, and this is our portfolio where we have the, as I said, the HE150, the smallest HCI cluster in the world. So we're starting there. That's an NVMe only system. The other system, HE500, HC1200, HC500 are available as an spinning only or all flash or hybrid. The HC3000, it's quite new. That's an NVMe only system, for example, for high performance databases or very high density VDI installations, whatever it's needed. So basically, we are here to help whenever there is a question and or a project or maybe a need for new IT infrastructure. Let's talk to us. We will help you from the beginning to the end. So that's the more or less the theory part of scale computing, and I'm now happy to hand over to my colleague William that we can have a live demo about scale computing and see what it's doing in real life. Are there questions in the meanwhile? So I haven't seen a question in the chat. Maybe. Okay, then William, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Torsten. Hello, my name is William van Kollenburg. I am a sales engineer at Skill Computing since January 2019. Before which I worked at Citrix, I've worked at VMware, and I've worked at a company called SpringPath, which some of you might actually know as one of our competitors nowadays, which is Cisco HyperFlex. What we see here is a skill cluster, and this is the standard GUI. This GUI is the same for every skill cluster. You saw that Torsten showed you a lot of different models. The GUI, as you see it over here, the graphical user interface, as you see it over here, is the same for all clusters, and the same also goes for all the functionality. So everything that I'm going to show during this demo is in the skill appliance. We sell appliances, and the theory says that there's a license applied to it, but basically it's the appliance that comes with all the functionality. So there's no different license levels, and there's no separate functions that need to be licensed additionally. So in the left top hand corner over here, we see a very cool Scale Computing logo, and next to this we see the name of the cluster. So this cluster is named Scale SSD cluster. This is not a type of cluster, it's just the name that one of my colleagues in the US has given to this cluster. Below this, we see the version number. And obviously the version number isn't really that important, although new features will, a new version will obviously give you either new features or some fixes or whatever. Sorry. But what is, I think, way more important is the way that we do our upgrades. Since we sell appliances, we know what kind of software is running, and we know what kind of hardware that software is running on. So our upgrades do not only contain the upgrade for our own hypercore OS, but it also contains all the necessary firmware updates. In other words, in a single update, I could have a function upgrade of the software and a feature upgrade of the BIOS, the UEFI, the X-Clarity controller, whatever is in there that you can use. So you only need to schedule one update moment for the entire cluster. The other thing is this update or this upgrade is obviously a rolling upgrade. This means that we start with the first node. It will be evacuated. So the VMs will be live migrated off this node. It will then be checked. And when the check is okay, it will perform the upgrade. After the upgrade, which usually also includes a reboot of some sort, maybe for a BIOS update or something like that, the node will be checked again. And if everything is okay, it will be taken back into the cluster, and we continue with the second node, and after that the third node, and after that the whatever node. Another very important aspect of this is that it's not just the upgrade that's automated, but if necessary, also the rollback that is being automated. In the middle here, we find the telemetry. Basically the status of the cluster, what is happening. So you can see that I'm currently using 1/3 of my CPU, 2/3 of my RAM, 2/3 of my disk space, etc. If I click on disk, I can get some additional information on what's happening with my disks, and you can see that I'm using about 2.3 terabytes for my virtual machines, about 1.5 terabytes for my snapshots. If I click on efficiency, for example, you can see that I'm using, or I'm actually saving about 3.3 terabytes in by making use of deduplication. And at provisioning, you can clearly see this is a demo cluster because it's been over provisioned 11 times. Not something we would do in a production environment, but as I said, it's a demo cluster. All the way to the right over here, we have the notification center. And if I click on there, you can see what the notifications are. As you can see, this cluster does not have all its network cards cabled. Normally, every node comes with 4 connections, 2 for the backend, 2 for the front end. These are 10 gig connections. The backend is where we do all our communication, so storage communication and things like that. The front end is where your virtual machines communicate with the rest of the world. Then one level lower, over here we see these 3 blocks, and these 3 blocks represent a cluster node. So this is a 3-node cluster. You can identify these by their IP addresses, and currently I'm accessing this interface through a URL, but if I were to be local to this cluster, I could actually manage this cluster from every machine. So every node in a cluster is also a management entity. This means that you no longer have a single point of failure in the management of your platform. The white lines that we see over here represent the virtual machines and specifically how much memory they are consuming. So they're not intended to identify where which virtual machine is running. It's just to identify how much memory is being used in one of these systems. And in the same fashion, I also have an overview of the disks. Now, like I said before, this is a hybrid system, and we can see this because there's 3 spinning disks in here and 1 SSD. So every node has 3 spinning disks and 1 SSD in this case. All disks in a scale solution are storage disks. There's no separate caching device, no separate tier for other stuff. No, it's a simple auto-tiering system. This means that all data will be distributed over the SSDs and the spinning disk. Now, if I take a look at one of my demo virtual machines, over here I said, thank you. You can see that I have given this virtual machine 3 virtual hard drives. The first one having the C drive, the second one having the F and H drive, and the third one having the G and I drive. Now, by making use of the heat priority or the hypercore edge auto tiering priority, I can define how much of this virtual disk is going to SSD and to spinning disk. If I set this to 0, all data will be written to spinning disk. When I set this between 1 and 10, all data is being written to SSD, and depending on the age of the data and depending on data with a higher priority coming in, that data will be offloaded to the spinning disks. When I set this to 11, all data will be written to SSD, and the system will attempt to keep that data on SSD. Hear me say attempt, because if the SSDs are becoming full, data will still be offloaded. Then as long as we are here and as long as we are looking at the virtual machines, creating a new virtual machine is quite easy. I give it a name. So I call this my new VM. I can give it a description. I usually don't, but you can give this a description. Then at tags, I give it the demo William tag. As you can see over here, I have a filter running on everything that's demo William. And over here, you can see that there is a group that contains virtual machines with a tag demo William. So when I hit enter here, what you will see is that it gets a grouping tag demo William. Now I can give it other tags, as many as I want. And these can be used by this filter too, but the grouping will always be done on the first tag. In the operating system section, I can choose Windows or something good. In the driver section, I can use performance drivers or compatible drivers. The performance drivers are the Red Hat VirtIO drivers. The compatible drivers are for disk IDE and for network Intel E1000. I can choose the number of CPUs that I want to use in this VM. I can choose the amount of memory that I want to use in this virtual machine. and I can indicate what kind of size I want for my hard drive, or maybe put in an extra hard drive, and I can select a installation medium. Creating a virtual machine takes between 15 and 30 seconds, and actually the longest part of this is the graphical user interface noticing that there is a new virtual machine. And as you can see, it's done. Now, if we take a look at what's in a virtual machine, obviously on this virtual machine, when I press the power button, it will go on. But if I press the power button on a virtual machine that's already turned on, I get the possibility for a reboot, a shutdown, or a complete power off. The console of AVM is also opened in the same web GUI. And again, every node in the cluster can provide you with a console to all the virtual machines in the cluster. And as you can see, I can simply just work with this VM. Log in. Oh, almost correct. There we go. I can just log into this machine and work with it. It's obviously not the best performance in working with it, but it does give you a handle into the virtual machine. And as you can see, we also recommend using other protocols once you have this VM set up. The default view is a telemetry view. So you can see this in all the VMs. And by the way, as you might have probably already noticed, the gray VMs are the ones that are turned off. The white VMs are the ones that are turned on. And again, you can see here that I'm using about 9% my CPU. I'm using 46 IOPS at this moment. In devices, what maybe is interesting to see is if I take the new one over here, the one that we just created, you can see that obviously that Server 2019 DVD is mounted, but also it automatically mounted the Scale Tools DVD. With this DVD, you can install the correct drivers, and you can install the VSS driver, so the snapshot quiescing driver. You see over here the hard disks, and keep in mind that the heat priority that we were setting earlier on, this is being managed per virtual disk. So I can give multiple virtual disks in a single system, multiple different heat priorities. At the bottom over here, you see my network card, and my network card, I can choose what type of driver I want to use. I can give it another MAC address to make sure that, for instance, when I've migrated this, a license keeps working. And I can add this to another VLAN. Now, VLANing in our system works slightly different than it works in all the other technologies, virtualization technologies that you know, as all of our virtual network management is fully automated. In other words, when I add a VLAN that has never been used before and is not yet known within the system, all changes necessary for that VLAN are being made automatically, and that VLAN is taken into the trunk uplink that it has. Obviously, over here, I can also add yet another virtual hard drive. I can add another network card. For instance, if I were to be doing Citrix provisioning server, I could choose a Realtek network card in a provisioning server VLAN. And once this is created, I could change the boot order and make sure that the Realtek network card is bootable. Last but not least, and this is obviously more interesting to show on a running VM, is the snapshot engine that we have. As you can see, or at least I hope this immediately catches your eyes, is I have 98 snapshots on this virtual machine. And I'll make this even worse. The oldest snapshot on this virtual machine dates back to March last year. So this system has just about 90 snapshots, with the oldest one being older than a year. If we try this with other technologies, you might quite quickly notice that it either becomes extremely slow or it becomes unworkable at all. And the other thing is it will consume quite a lot of space. In our case, we don't have that problem since we have a block-based distributed file system. This means that we do not have to copy around object-based data, but simply can reference blocks instead of complete objects. This is yet another thing that makes our file system more efficient. As you can see, my snapshots are being created by a schedule, and this schedule is called my uber important stuff. And let's take a look at this schedule that's called my uber important stuff. It is over here, and when I go here and I click edit, you can see that I'm doing a snapshot every minute, which I keep for 6 minutes, for every 5 minutes, which I keep for more than an hour, every hour, which I keep for more than a day, every day, which I keep for a week, every week, which I keep for more than a month, and every month that I keep for more than a year. I'm not doing replication on this cluster, but if I were to do replication, I can even select for the same snapshot to be kept for approximately 7 years on my remote side. So I have a separate retention for local and a separate retention for remote. This means that I can do more advanced backup technologies. Now you will immediately think, I think, hey William, a snapshot is never a backup. And there you are absolutely correct. A snapshot is never a backup because if you lose the original, the snapshot data will become worthless. The same goes for replication. If I destroy data in the original, that data will also be destroyed in the replica. That is the whole reason that we do snapshot-based replication. So we replicate our snapshots. This means that I have on both sides the complete original VM and all of the snapshots that are included with that VM, which means I can lose an entire site. I can lose the original without any problem. I could even delete the original on site A and still be able to recover from site B. This is why we say that you can consider our solution also to be a full backup solution. To give you a quick demo of that, you see a lot of important data over here, and my manager told me that this data should not be on my desktop, but it should be in a folder. And I really like the 3D design of the recycle bin folder, so I thought that would be a great folder to put everything in. And then my Dutch colleague logged in and said, well, you can't have data in your recycle bin, that's against policies. So he right-clicked and he said empty recycle bin. And right now I lost my job. And you will say, hey, William, you can still restore a snapshot. That is correct until some new data arrives. Some new important data. As you might know, a snapshot is a point-in-time copy. This means if I go back to one of my snapshots, at that point in time, some new important data will not have existed yet. So if I go back to a snapshot, I will actually destroy some new important data. We have a very cool solution for this. If I go to my snapshots over here, and let's go back, it's now 13:37. Let's go back 5 minutes over here. I can open this up and you can see that my snapshots are actually managed per virtual drive. I know that that data is on my desktop, so it should be in my C drive in the profile. I can choose to mount that to the same VM, or I could select a recovery VM or something that I have prepared for that. Normally I would select a recovery VM, but this is a demo, so I'm being lazy. I click this button behind here, and what this button will do is it will create a clone of this block device and mount it to this virtual machine. And since this is a linked clone, it's done almost immediately. Now I can go to this virtual machine, go to my Explorer, go to my desktop, and you can see that I now got an extra drive with a new system reserved partition and a new local disk. I can click on this, go to Users Administrator Desktop, and copy this really important data back over here. And as you can see, I've now done a file recovery where I still have my new data and I have all that old data back. So I've done a file level recovery. Our backup mechanism is mainly focused on file level recovery. This means that we are not able to look into applications. So if you have, let's say, an Exchange database, if you might have a SQL database, something like that, and you want to restore a single row or you want to restore a single email, you would still require a backup application that can look into the applications. Now, for this purpose, we are working together with Acronis. We have developed a backup API together with Acronis, so they can do agentless backups in our system. And this API has been released. It's just waiting until other backup vendors decide to make use of that API. So the question that I usually get is, does it also work with Veeam? Not at this moment, but we are hoping that Veeam will pick this up as soon as possible. This does not mean that it does not work together with the agents of Veeam. So if you already have Veeam, you could still use the agents to take a backup of this system. Then we go to the command center or the control center of a skill cluster. In the log, you can see that the log is named. This is very important. This means that you can see that I have, for instance, deleted a disk. Might be very important to notice. In conditions, well, we've seen this. This is where my alerts are. On the control page, you can shut down the cluster, but it does carry a warning. Don't do this if you have a problem, because if you have a problem, we would really like to help you fix this problem and make sure that it doesn't happen again. Media is where I upload my ISOs. Remote clusters is where I could find an overview of my replication partners. And unfortunately, I don't have one. But if I were to have a replication partner, you would actually have this header over here. This part of the remote cluster would also be displayed in this remote clusters page. Remote support, if you have a problem and you call our support department, one of the first questions that they will ask you is if you can open up a support tunnel. They give you a code. I'm just typing in something random, and then you can click open connection. When this connection is open, this is an outbound connection, so your cluster is connecting to our support department. Then our support department can look into the Hypercore OS to see what is wrong. Keep in mind that they cannot look into your virtual machine. So if you have a problem with the virtual machine, they will ask you to do a WebEx session or something like that. Once you're done, or if you no longer trust it, you can click the close connection button, and then this tunnel to the support department will be closed. We've seen the schedules. I think it's worth mentioning again that our schedules can have multiple occurrences with multiple retention times in a single schedule. We have our standard settings, which are all the normal things: who owns the cluster, what are the DNS services, do I use syslog servers, things like that. And this is also where you can enable or disable our API. Our API comes with a built-in API browser. So this is the documentation for everything that you can do with this API. So let's say that you are a MSP and you want to rent out virtual machines to your customers. You could create your own website or your own web shop where people can select the details of their virtual machine, and you could have the API create that virtual machine for you. As an example, I could over here do a vir domain create. I can try this out. So show me what happens. So I give this virtual machine a name. I could give it still a description. I could choose the operating system. I can indicate how much RAM I want to give this. I can give an example of how many CPUs I want in there. I can give a disk type. So over here it says do a IDE disk and let's do a capacity of 1024.000. I can give the string whether or not it's shared, but this is not that important. And I can do many things. At text, I need to do demo William, and then I could say execute. I don't think this is going to work because I didn't do all the required fields. But just to give you an example, nope. These are the things that you can do. And as I said, I don't have everything filled in, so it didn't work. But theoretically, I could create a virtual machine like this. SSL certificates, this is where you can upload your own certificates. Obviously, you can only upload them, you cannot view them back. But as you can see, I have a certificate that was issued to Skill Computing. This is the update page. If there's an update available, you will see a yellow line below this version number that says an update is available. And here you will get a description of that update with a big black button that says apply update. In user management, I can create and delete users with different roles, different rights, things like that. In support, I have a couple of links to support documentation and, for instance, a direct link to the customer portal or the partner portal where you can register your support calls. But also keep in mind that one of these clusters always comes with 24/7 phone support. So the quickest way to get support is to pick up the phone and call us. And when I click exit, I am back at this overview. Right now, I can congratulate every single one of you as you are now all Skill certified. I know that is a joke, but there basically is nothing else to managing a skill cluster. Obviously, you haven't taken the installation course yet, but trust me, those two commands will work for everyone. Are there any questions so far?